Folks, I have been missing in action for a while, and the reason for that is because I decided to take a break. I decided to go into my man cave and relax, play a few games, watch a bunch of movies. I decided just to get my mind off of a lot of the things that are going on right now. Because if you concentrate on something for a long period of time, you tend to become jaded and possibly to some extent paranoid when you have concerns. And I have major concerns about where we are as a people, where we are as a country, where we are, period. Now, I'm going to flash before you a bunch of images. And all the images have to do with racism in America. Here we go. All right, you get the picture. America's got a major problem with racism. But more to the point, racism versus black people is probably the most pervasive part of America that I can think of. Now, there are a bunch of minorities in America. You have, obviously, black people, Muslims, Hispanics, and Asians, for the most part. You also have Native Americans as well. Now, with that being said, Asians, for the most part, suffered overt racism during World War II, where a bunch of Japanese Americans were interned for the duration of the war, but after which they were released. And obviously you should be aware that they received cash payments, reparations for the injustice that was done to them. But for the most part, that's as bad as it got, and it was over a very short period of time. Hispanics obviously have suffered racism, not to the same extent as other groups. Basically, they were shut down, and their political power reduced through what we know as gerrymandering, and there was also fiscal intimidation against them. Now, when we come to people of the Muslim faith, America's game steps up. Muslims now are having laws enacted against them, and they are beginning to come under physical attacks. I reference you to the 18-year-old Muslim girl that was killed recently in Virginia for no reason other than she basically was a Muslim, and you had a racist person who just went off of the rails. But now we come to black people. Black people are the only minority within this country that suffered slavery to a major extent. Now, you had Native Americans who white people tried to enslave. You had Asians that white people tried to enslave. I don't know about Hispanics being enslaved, but anyway, on those first two, white people realized that it didn't work because basically the Asians died when they were enslaved. They didn't procreate, they just died. Same thing with Native Americans. Slavery didn't work as far as that was concerned, and they died as well. It was only the black people who had the perseverance to be able to survive slavery. Post-slavery, you had massive lynchings, thousands, not tens, not hundreds, but thousands, possibly tens of thousands of black people. A lot of, mostly male, but women as well and children were absolutely physically abused, lynched, killed in this country. Black people also suffered gerrymandering, where even with equal or greater numbers, their political power was basically castrated, and I use that particular word consciously. And only in America are there official government officially sanctioned symbols of racism. I give you the Confederate flag. I give you all of the statues of the Southern generals that fought in the Civil War on the side of slavery and racism. I give you websites such as Breitbart I give you the state of North Carolina with its racially motivated voting laws, along with Texas, Kansas, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana. The list goes on, folks. But I digress. Basically, I'm stating this because black people are an endangered race in America. We are the most hated, the most targeted people in this country. Now, I say that after reading an article in The Root and watching a video by one of the people that I subscribe to, Taryn Rain. And I'll leave links to the article that I read in The Root. The title of the article is "The Troubling History of the Most Racist Politician in America." And that article was specifically about Chris Kobach, a racist that President Trump has appointed to his Presidential Advisory Commission on Voting Integrity, which basically is just a front for attempting to further disenfranchise primarily black people. Now, you can read the articles for yourself and come to your own conclusion, but the conclusion I came to is Mr. Trump is trying to take from a state level to a national level voter disenfranchisement, and in particular, voter disenfranchisement for black people. Now, I point to you that the attack on black people takes place on the federal, the state, and the local levels. In other words, the entire system is corrupt as far as the fair treatment of black people in this country. Now, I mentioned Steve Kobach, but you also have Steve Bannon, who is in the next room away from the president. He is a white supremacist, and I refer you to his running of Breitbart, Breitbart. Look it up, go through their website for yourself and make your own decision. And I also refer you to Steve Miller, racist, white supremacist. You can Google his name and get the information on him for yourself. But Mr. Miller hates black people, but even more than black people, Mr. Miller was a hater of Hispanic people. And he is documented to be a white supremacist. So on the federal level, laws are being created or removed, such as the Affordable Care Act, that will negatively impact a lot of Americans, but black America more so than anything else. But that's just on the federal level. Let's go to the state level. States like Texas, North Carolina, and the other states that I mentioned previously, all are making overt attempts at voter suppression, which will affect black people. Mr. Kobach was or still is, I'm sorry, an official in the state of Kansas. I believe he's their Secretary of State, or he could be their AG. I'm not particularly sure which one he is, though I do know that he does hold a position in Kansas. And I'm going to leave you a link for the article in The Root. And I got to tell you, he is one of the most dangerous men in America as far as black people are concerned. Mr. Kobach has a history of racism, and not just against black people. In the article, you will see that he was the person who attempted to have a law drafted and ratified after 9/11 to require all Muslims to be interrogated, photographed, and fingerprinted. And I do mean all. But go into the article yourself and you will be able to see what I'm talking about. The Southern Poverty Law Center calls Mr. Kobach the #1 lawyer for America's nativist movement. Translation: this guy, anytime there's anything done that requires any type of legal representation or analysis, it's Mr. Kobach that's called in. He specifically works for various hate groups. But enough about him. On a local level, it's obvious that racism exists in America, and particularly against black people. I point out to you all of the recent police shootings of black people, unwarranted, unjustified shootings that made their way through the legal system, and all of the cases, and I do mean all of the cases. Let me back up a second. All but one of the cases that I'm aware of, the police officers were found not guilty. Whereas if an ordinary citizen had committed the same act, they would have been thrown under the jail. And if it had been a black citizen, they would have been thrown under the jail, the building bulldozed, and concrete laid over the spot. The one case that I can think of where the officer did receive justice was that case in Oklahoma where you had that quote-unquote white police officer, and he wasn't white, convicted of raping raping black women. He wasn't convicted of all 13 rapes, but he was convicted of enough of them that he got about 240 years in prison. Oh, and by the way, he was only half white. The other case I can think of is the officer who was tried in North Carolina for shooting a black man in the back while the black man was running away with no weapons. And the jury came back hung. They could not believe their own eyes or the evidence presented to them. And I guess fortunately, the police officer decided to take a plea deal for less potential time. But other than that, you cannot point out to me a case where an officer, especially a white officer, was convicted of a crime of murder or even assault, basically, against a black person that has made any type of national news. Further, on the local level, I saw a video by Mr. Taron Rain, which I'm going to attach a link to, that showed the same exact offense being committed by a white man and a black man. And the ultimate outcome was the white man, who had a criminal record, custody after a police chase. And he was taken into custody without being physically harmed. This occurred, I believe, back in June in Indiana. In the same state of Indiana and the same city of Indianapolis, a black man was fleeing from police, crashed his car, as did the white man, got out and was on foot, but had no weapons, and the police opened up and killed him. This man had no criminal record, whereas the white man had a criminal record. Everything was pretty much identical as far as the uninformed observer could see. Yet the black man is dead and has had his funeral, whereas the white man has a court date. I point out to you what I believe to be a test situation that is occurring in the city of Chicago. Rahm Emanuel has somehow dictated that in order to obtain a high school diploma, you must file a plan for what you're going to do after high school. So you must, before your graduation from high school and obtaining your high school diploma, let the government, at least that local government, know whether you plan on attending college, a trade school, if you have acquired a job, which is pretty much unlikely at that point, or if you are going to go into the military. Now, folks, I don't know about you, but as a high school student, I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. Now, I was fortunate because I had an opportunity to go to college. I was already working when I was in high school, and I knew the military was out and trade school just wasn't where I was going. So at least I had a couple of options. But how many of our young people today really have any idea of what they're going to do? And I'm talking about our black young people. As far as college, the opportunity to even go to college because of affordability. Same with trade schools. Forget about having a job coming straight out of high school. So it looks like the only option is either jail or the military. And I believe that that military option is being ramped up, particularly given the situation that we have in the Middle East and now with North Korea. You're not going to have a whole lot of white people who are going to be anxious to enlist in the military because of the likelihood of potential conflicts around the world. But that military option is being put out in front of our minority kids, and the other avenues for success in life are being choked off. Folks, I worry about my grandkids, my nephews and nieces, about most of the minorities in this country, because I believe that we are being pigeonholed into specific situations where we have no choices. or let me back up and say few choices. And those choices appear to be the military or incarceration. There's a reason why the percentage of people that are incarcerated is highly tilted towards minorities, and in particular black men and black women. This hasn't changed in the past 150 years. This hasn't changed in the past 400 years. It's up to us to recognize exactly what's going on. It's up to us to do something. Now, what can we do? Well, there is a lot of conjecture about that one. What do we do as far as our interaction with our police? Some have said, and I'm not one of them, that better to be judged by 12 than carried out by 6. And you should know what that means. Some would say that we need to get the right, quote unquote, elected leaders in place. And you've seen how that's worked out for black people. Now, as far as the Asians are concerned, they may be a small minority, but their representation takes care of business for them. And the Hispanics in various areas in the country, Los Angeles, New York, Texas, Illinois, they are getting stronger and stronger. And as noted in previous videos, the Hispanics are going to be the largest minority in the country within the next 23 years. I'm wondering what white people are going to do when they are slowly being kicked out of political power. I wonder if they're going to change their focus away from black people and more towards the Hispanic people. But guess what? It'll probably be too late by the time they realize that. We black people need to do something as far as getting our numbers back up to where they belong. But with abortion and Planned Parenthood and the incarceration of the black male, that is going to be a tough road to hoe. Again, folks, it looks like white people basically have succeeded in choking us off, in making us the most hated, vilified people in America. And it's up to us to try to push back and do something about it. Depressing, isn't it? I don't know about you, but it's depressing to me, and I'm hoping that at least I can have some small effect on trying to reverse this trend. I guess we'll see.